How long is this session going to last?
45 minutes.
Oh, okay.
But I think the last 10 minutes will be Q&A.
Okay.
But it's 4 questions with 4. So it's actually, I just finished from a session like 10 minutes ago. And it was, I actually thought it was so fast. It was 45 minutes too. But by the time we were done, I realized we might have needed a bit more time.
Oh, okay.
To answer. Yes, so it's
it's
very
20 minutes.
Yes, I thought 45 minutes was long, but after everything, it turned out we might have needed more time. But yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Ah.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Hello.
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Hello, nice to be here. Nice to meet you too.
Nice to meet you too. So I'm Yasmin. I'll be the moderator for this session.
Wonderful. I'm Sebastian Manhart.
Hi, Sebastian. Welcome. Pleasure to meet you here.
Pleasure. Yasmin, and what's your name?
My name is Ibrahim.
Yasmin Ibrahim.
Nice to meet you, Ibrahim.
So we're just waiting for the 2 other panelists to join us, and then we start. So maybe in 1 minute, if they're not here, then we'll just start.
Okay.
Before they join us. Okay, so I think maybe we should start, and they might join us in the middle of the session.
Okay, absolutely.
That's okay with all of you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, all right then.
Sounds good.
So my name is Yasmin Ibrahim, and I'll be the moderator for the session today. So I would like both of you to please introduce yourselves to our viewers and tell us exactly what you do, briefly. So, Mr. Ibrahim, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Yasmin, for having us here, and thanks to the organizers of this conference. My name is Ibrahim Abdullahi. I work in public sector. I trained as a lawyer. I'm currently the chief executive of Nasarawa Investment and Development Agency. Nasarawa Investment and Development Agency is a one-stop shop for doing business in Nasarawa State. It acts as a trade facilitator for the state. We also do investment management as well as business environment reforms. So our work over the past 3 years has been around improving the business climate in Nasarawa State and also attracting investors and investments into the state. I have a very young team of about 30 active new entrants into public service. So it's a pleasure to be here.
So thank you very much, Mr. Ibrahim, for taking your time to join us today. And Mr. Sebastian, please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you do.
Yes, my name is Sebastian Manhart. Nowadays, I work as an advisor to governments in the space of technology and digitization. My background is as an entrepreneur. I was an entrepreneur for around 10 years, set up a bunch of companies, including a technology nonprofit called Simbrins, which is now operating in 16 different countries. And after that, after I stopped my entrepreneurship journey, I actually decided to go more into the public sector. That's probably why I'm here. And I worked for the German Chancellery, which was then Angela Merkel's office, as an advisor on technology, on digitization, which was super interesting. I'm sure we're going to talk about that. With the change in government in Germany, which happened earlier this year, that role stopped, and now I'm advising governments independently and also through the World Bank. But yeah, pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Sebastian. So quickly, before we start, I would like to say if anybody has any questions for our panelists, please, you can type that in the chat. And when we're done with the discussions, we can look at that and give you answers. And we'll also have a 10-minute question and answer session after this discussion. So I'd like to direct my first question to Mr. Ibrahim, and the question is, how did your earlier choices and experiences, both education, professional, and even business, lead you to where you are now and shape your success?
Thank you, Yasmin, for that question. So I come from a background of public service. My my late grandfather taught as a public school teacher, a principal, and later on becoming the monarch of our own hometown. So I've always seen people around me be in public service. That's the tradition of our family. That's the heritage. So my father also joined public service, and so that's really what I've grown to see. And early on in school, I got to be involved in school debates, quiz competitions, and that really struck in me. And then I began to think about really being in public service itself. And very early on, I read about two people, Nelson Mandela and Bill Clinton. And I realized that for Mandela, all of the most of the people that were instrumental to the apartheid struggle in South Africa were all lawyers. And I read about Bill Clinton. I realized Bill Clinton was a lawyer. And then there's this line from Bill Clinton's book, My Life. He said to be great, I needed to be a lawyer, to even be greater, a president, something like that. But that really struck me, and I then since about class 4 in primary school, I wanted to be a lawyer, because I thought being a lawyer, you'd be people's champion, you'd be a freedom fighter. A lot of people will rely on your help, and you would be able to use your skills to get people out of trouble. That was the mindset from the get-go. When I went to uni, um, studying politics in my foundation year and law also just re-solidified the need for me to actually study law, and I thought it will also prepare me for all of the aspirations I had. So as I said from early on, I wanted to be a public sector leader, and I thought studying law and being a lawyer would actually just put me on that path. Um, Also, a bit of some of the things that I did. I had a stint at consulting. So early on, also in uni, I took some jobs part time in consulting, and I developed a commercial interest that really deviated a bit from the journey. I thought I was going to spend the rest of my years in the private sector, just advising companies, commercial entities. But here am I now in public sector, because I got the opportunity to join public sector. So I think that the choices I made in terms of the sort of school activities, extracurricular activities I took part in, my career choice, the choice of my associations, even at uni, the choice of the companies I first started working at, all shaped in leading me onto this role in public sector. So I think it's usually um, it requires some kind of long-term planning and sticking to your plans, and while sticking to your plans also being very flexible, because I've also realized over the years that our careers are usually shaped by uh, accidents. When I mean accidents, unforeseen circumstances that we may never have thought about. Some jobs that you come across, you would never imagine that you come across them. It might be out of a conversation on a flight or on a train or at a supermarket. Uh, that is how the real life works. So you have to prepare very early on, so that when you stumble into these opportunities, you will make good use of them.
Wow.
Thank you.
Very interesting. Thank you very much. Mr. Sebastian, I would like to direct the same question to you.
Well, for starters, I didn't study law, which was clearly a mistake, because even in Europe, it's true. If you look into like the civil service or like state secretaries, 90% of them are lawyers. So, Ibrahim, you clearly did something right there. I'm an economist development economist by trade, so less useful, I think, in that context. No, but my journey was a bit different in the sense that my 20s were very much focused. I'm 32 now, and my 20s were very much focused on growth and trying to grow as a professional as much as I could, both in terms of academics, but also in terms of professional. And what I decided to do was to be an entrepreneur, because I've always been attracted to it. I've been doing it since I was 18. But I just found the the growth journey of entrepreneurship almost unparalleled with anything else I saw around me, just in terms of how much you have to learn in such a short time span. And so I'm very grateful that I was able to do that, and it opened up many, many, many doors. So at 30, when I decided that I wanted to make a switch to public sector, I had a profile where I could position myself as an expert, where I could bring an entrepreneurial attitude, which again we haven't yet spoken about, but that was probably my biggest asset in not just getting a job, but also being successful in the public sector, because the profile of an entrepreneur is quite rare in the public sector. And so, yeah, I spent my 30s kind of, I guess, building the skills and the reputation to then be able to transition. And what I encountered in the public sector is that the traditional path, at least in Europe, is quite difficult, because if you want to join the public sector, if you want to become a civil servant, it's quite rigid. You often have to start from the very bottom, no matter how experienced you are. And the career trajectory is quite structured and rigid. Whereas what I kind of discovered is that there are a lot of positions like mine, which are more advisory positions to civil servants, to ministers, to state secretaries, which are much more flexible in terms of where you can enter and also what you can do. And so for me, being an entrepreneur allowed me to kind of navigate this murky space of advisory roles much better, network my way into the right roles, and then be able to succeed at them. So yeah, I would say that was very critical for my success today.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Mr. Sebastian. So my next question would be to Mr. Ibrahim. What would you consider are the critical success factors for professionals in your industry? So coming from a background in law and being in public service right now, what would you consider are the critical success factors?
Well, I think the skills are most critical first. So I don't know what I would even consider first, my own industry, but I think I'm very much a lawyer, as I am a public servant. As you know, public service, um, my kind of position is tenured, so it's transient. So after 4 years, there will be a new government, and if you get reappointed and so on. But I think the most critical success factor is having the skill sets to be able to contribute, because without the skill set to be able to get the work done and add value, you wouldn't be allowed in the room. So, as you know, anywhere you go to, there is really a currency that you carry, either a performance currency, relationship currency, or the likes. But as a young person in public service, your biggest currency is performance, right? Are you able to be on the table and get the job done as others won't be able to? That is really what will keep you, and that's the most critical success factor. The more you're able to deliver on the job, the more successful you will be, because then words go around very fast in public service, and you get invited to the table over and over again. But if you're not able to get the job done, i.e., you don't have the skill set, then it becomes problematic and you're not able to move on to the next stage. Um, Another critical success factor is mentorship, relationship. Um, in public service, generally, at least in Nigeria and some part of Africa that I know, you get recommended. Your CV, your profile get passed around to policymakers, politicians, as they begin to form governments when they win elections, i.e., and you need to have the right kind of sponsors, the right kind of mentors and network for your profile to be pushed around as somebody that can get the job done. So that's also a success factor. A case in point, I got appointed into public service because a mentor of mine shared a piece of our work from our firm with uh, our governor, who had just been elected at the time, and he was looking to pull together a team and develop his policy document. And our firm had written an insight report that touched on how subnationals can revamp the economy, their local economies, through a private sector participation. And that really just got the attention of the governor and wanted to sit on the table with us. But had my mentor not shared the work, maybe I wouldn't be having that conversation. So having the skill set and also having a network that uh, gets your work around are very important.
Okay, so thank you very much for that. Mr. Sebastian, I would also like to ask you the same question, but coming from an economist's point of view in the public sector. So what are the critical success factors for economists in public service?
Yeah, and I guess I'm an economist, but also really what identifies me more is that I was an entrepreneur for 10, 12 years. So I think that's probably how I'm going to answer the question. My first piece of advice would be maybe a bit controversial, but not to join the public sector until a bit further in your career, because I've just seen that people who first spend, and I mean, Ibrahim as well did a stint in consulting, right? Like people who spend some time in the private sector, within startups or in consulting or the corporate or whatever, will get a lot of skills that will prove very useful in their civil service career. So I think over a 10, 15, 20 year horizon, you'll actually progress much faster if you don't join the civil service right out of university. So that would be my first piece of advice, actually. The second one is what I've seen really succeed. One is technical skills. Especially I work in tech, and government civil service is across the board. I've worked with many governments. There's never enough technical talent. There's a reason for that. People who are trained computer engineers, for example, software engineers, can get usually much better paying jobs in the private sector, which is why they don't join the civil sector. But it's one thing that I'd really recommend. If you are interested in public service and you have technical skills or want to build them, you'll have a huge competitive edge, because usually there's a huge lack of these kinds of profiles. So those people progress probably much faster. And the other thing is, for me, intrinsic motivation is incredibly important. I found that people who it's linked to what Ibrahim said about getting the job done, but like people who don't need to be nudged 100 times, but who just have an intrinsic motivation to do good work and to perform and to deliver quality on time, those people progress quite fast, because again, in some areas they're quite rare and they're naturally promoted and picked to go to more interesting places. So yeah, summarizing, I would say don't go straight into civil sector, take your time, get some experiences. If you can, get some technical skills, those are really helpful, and be intrinsically motivated.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So moving on to our next question. Mr. Ibrahim, so what do you think are the biggest trends and opportunities you see in public service or in business in public service, and how can one take advantage of these opportunities?
So I think there are a lot of opportunities. The first opportunity is that there's a huge skill gap. Because there's a huge skill gap, when you come, say, fresh out of university or fresh out of the private sector, you'd realize that there's a lot for you to give, right? So whenever there's a gap in something, then there's an opportunity to create something that works, something much more meaningful. So that's the first opportunity. The second opportunity also is that uh, access to technology. Um, Young people these days have better grasp of the technology more than the old block that in the civil service, at least in Nigeria and around Africa. So because of this, it has become an opportunity. So as a young person going into public service with skill set and also grasp of technology, uh, there lies some of the biggest opportunities for you, because you go into public service, you realize that people have different motivations for being in public service. But as a young person or coming from the private sector with a sort of skill set, the orientation, the expertise, the experience, you have a lot more to add, and that becomes an opportunity. And in public service, they say the reward for hard work is more work. The more you're able to deliver, the more work will be pushed your way. So I think these are very big opportunities. As for threats, I think that the public service is quite resistant to change. um, it still can be described as stuck in its ways. When for 20 years a file is used to be arranged this way, and it doesn't serve any good, everybody will just come and keep arranging the files this way. Nobody will look for other ways to arrange the files to be more efficient, to be more effective, because everyone is afraid of change. So that's one threat that people will find in public service. But you have to be courageous to be able to take certain risks and try new things. Thank you.
So thank you very much. We can see that our final two panelists have joined us. So just a brief introduction. My name is Yasmin. I'm the moderator for this session. And with me are Mr. Ibrahim and Mr. Sebastian. Please, we would like you to introduce yourselves. So to Fatima, if I'm correct, please tell us about what you do. Introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you do.
Okay. Thank you for having me here today, and apologies for the delay. We had some technical gremlins to deal with this morning. So my name is Fatima Abba, and I am a pharmacist, actually, professionally. So, but I, over the last 10 to 15 years, have worked in various areas of the public sector within healthcare, mainly. I currently work as a staff officer / senior technical assistant within the UK Security Agency. Most of my work is based on emergency response systems and strengthening healthcare, health security within the UK Prior to that, I've spent some time within Nigeria and Ethiopia doing work around healthcare and emergency response systems. So that's a little bit about me. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining us, and over to you, Mr. Abdulmalik. Can you please tell us a bit about what you do?
Thank you so much, Ms. Yasmin. I'm Abdulmalik Badamasuiy. I'm a Deputy Director in the Presidency Bureau of Public Enterprise, Abuja. And my work focuses mainly on public sector, legal, consultancy, privatization, and commercialization of public enterprises. The first thing we do is to reform any sector we are privatizing. Then we set up the policy paper. Then we try to go to the market to be able to either use our index for privatization, concessioning, or commercialization. And that is basically what we do across all the sectors of the economy.
Okay, so thank you very much for that. So I would like to direct the question that Mr. Sebastian was answering before you joined us to Ms. Fatima. So the question is, what are the biggest trends and opportunities you see in the industry, and how can one take advantage of the industry, of the opportunities, sorry? So coming from a health, security, or health background, so what are the biggest trends and opportunities you see, and how can one take advantage of the opportunities?
I think the public sector is where the powerhouse of any decision making and development opportunities and opportunities for growth. In my opinion, there's a lot of opportunities within that space because there lies the power there. So for me, it's about being able to leverage on the systems that are available within the public sector. If I reflect quite closely on health, for example, the government probably would make most of the decisions around any strategies or interventions that need to be made. Perhaps implementation might go a slightly different way, but for me, that is a place where you can go and actually dock in and contribute to that decision making / that opportunity to grow and develop the processes that are within that space. So those are clear opportunities. Other opportunities are potential for rising within the system and the structure and knowing and understanding in detail some of the challenges within the sector and some of the opportunities as well. And then in terms of perhaps maybe threats is, I think when I joined, Ibrahim mentioned something about fear of change. I think there's a lot of fear of change, but there's also issues with bureaucracy when sometimes government decisions or political decisions can sometimes influence how you progress certain ideas or interventions or strategies. I think those are sometimes where you might find some of the threats that can go, okay, actually, I can't progress further in what I'd like to do. And you mentioned threats, talk about how you mitigate them. For me, it's then finding alternative methods or groups or bodies that can support in actually driving that view, and hopefully that influencing decision making at political level as well. So that would be kind of where I think there is. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Mr. Abdulmalik. I would also like to direct the question to you, and seeing that you're a deputy director at one of the largest public service organizations in Nigeria, I'm sure you have your experience will help to answer the question our two panelists have about the rigidity, and the resistance to change in the system. So the question, I'll repeat again, is what are the biggest trends and opportunities you see in the industry or in public service, and how can one take advantage of these opportunities? But also give us a quick answer as to why the system is as rigid as it is, and a bit resistant to change, coming from the younger public servants. So over to you, Mr. Abdulmalik.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Yasmin. I think it's two-way. I mean, one of the best, our old minister, Shamsuddin has answered your question very clearly in his thesis that he left as one of the pioneer public servants in Nigeria. He said there are two systems, the British system and the American system that were left over to us, process and procedure, not outcome-based. When you look at the system, the way the public sector is run in Nigeria, it is outcome-based. You follow the process and procedure. It's not focused on results, what you get out of it. This is how it is done, and this is the way it should be done. Just follow the process. Whether it will achieve a result or not, minute divide, get it done. But the opportunity there now to build the rigidity is what you call innovative mindset. And what do I mean by innovative mindset? From up down to the cradle, we are now retraining our staff that when you're working in a public sector, develop your mindset. There are two tools: creativity, collegiality. Be creative in your approach to your work. Be creative in your thinking. Be creative in your answering of the question. Then carry the colleagues along. Your senior, your subordinate. Let them know how you do what you do and what is the impact, what is the end goal. Two tools for the creative mindset, for the innovative mindset as an entrepreneur is creativity and collegiality. Creativity is what we are coming to impact that will leave illustrious and emulative impact in the organization. Collegiality is the ability to carry people along, the subordinate and your bosses, to convince them that this is how it is done. But we can think it in a new way. And we are thinking in a new way because 1, 2, 3, and we'll achieve this thing. With this innovative mindset and carrying people along, you'll be able to take them to a point of high destinations. And I think that is the way we normally build rigidity. First of all, is to tell you that this is what is supposed to be done. This is how it is done. And these are the challenges. This is our answer to the challenges. Innovative mindset. When you have innovative mindset, you have innovative impact that can leave a landmark of, oh, this is what we have been struggling for. When she came in, she was able to see us illumination in new light. It is just having creativity mindset and collegiality. These two things are the way to bring the rigidity. Carry people along, bring your new ideas and sell it to them and impact it. Thank you.
So thank you very much for that, Mr. Abdulmalik. And so our final question would be, what advice would you give to your younger self at the start of your career? So Mr. Ibrahim, just one advice. We'll take one from everybody, then take questions and close this session.
One advice, I think I'd spend a little longer time in consulting, get more skills and more experience, then join public service. But the most important advice actually is to seize the times. A lot of things will happen in very unconventional ways. So say no to conventional wisdom. Seize the times. Really, that's the best way you can effect change. And people have different experiences and different opportunities. So what opportunity A comes to Mr. B might not come to you at that same time. So you should just always seize the times and be bold.
Okay, so Mr. Sebastian, same to you. What advice would you give to your younger self at the start of your career?
Something that I only started implementing later in my life, but I would recommend doing straight away, is to not waste time on formal application processes and official applications, and to invest all your time in networking. Like literally 95% of your time in networking, maybe 5% of time on applications, just because they're a waste of time. You don't get anything back if they go badly, and your chances are just never great through that system. So just anything you want to get, network your way into it. Don't spend time on applications.
Thank you for that. Ms. Fatima, same question to you, please. Sorry, we can't hear you.
I did the mute thing. So for me, I would echo one thing. I would echo is Sebastian's point about networking. Absolutely critical from day one of when you complete your degree or whatever educational system you do. And also, and again, this is something I'm also implementing in my life later on, be deliberate in every single thing you do. whatever choice you choose, you need to have a plan. Is this what's going to be? What does it do for me? So be deliberate in every decision you make. And this might sound very different to most people, but take risks. Take calculated risk around your professional progress. If you think, oh, something looks interesting, I'd like to try it, but I'm not sure because there's this uncertainty of what, because that would be the limitation.
Orientation and opportunities.
That could be one open up the doors for you to take risks that are sensible risks and actually will provide some sort of potential opportunity gain from it. So those would be the 3 things I'll say to myself. I wouldn't hold and follow the system. I'll take a risk to take a leap to go into something that I think might be beneficial for me for the future.
Okay, and Mr. Abdulmalik, what would you, what advice would you give to your younger self? Just one.
Culture of orientation of the environment of where you are working, the people and the work that has to be done. And when you get that, as Fatima said, the next thing is networking. After networking, preparedness. After preparedness, kairos. When you are prepared to meet opportunity, this is not luck. When preparedness meets opportunity, it is called kairos, which is success. And that is the success story. Thank you.
Right. So thank you very much to our panelists for joining us. Mr. Ibrahim, would you like to say something before leaving and before we join the Q&A?
Okay, so thank you very much for this opportunity, and apologies that I have to leave early because I have a train to catch. But to the organizers of this conference, I think this is a very important session. I often say to young people these days, apologies to Sebastian, but this is mainly Nigeria and Africa based. If you're a young person with relative education, relative privilege, relative skills, there are 2 things, there are 2 most important things that we have to do, right? You're either trying to build a business or join public service, because we have a country to build, and the best ways we can build that country is, 1, if we have a very competent and active public service, and secondly, if we have a complementing private sector building businesses that will employ people and change lives. So this is an important message that we must throw around to all young people that are Nigerian, that are African, and by extension, even from Europe and other parts of the world. There's a lot of building to do, and it needs all our hands to be on deck. So it's a real pleasure being on this panel, and hopefully we'll meet sometime again soon. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Ibrahim, for joining us. While you leave, we'll continue with the Q&A session, which is just a few minutes. So I would like to put to our viewers, if anybody has any question for any of our panelists, please, you can type it down and I will put it to them for discussion and answers. And if any of the panelists have questions for any of the other panelists, you're welcome to discuss. None. Mr. Abdulmalik, you have a question?
Yeah. I think it's very engaged. Well, I came in once again for coming. Ibrahim said before, the public sector is always having any. Across all the you right public this man, with more time to explain what are the characteristics that in the sector away from corruption. What those networks in place to say we have a case the president to the generation we are what
Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Abdulmalik. It's cracking, so your audio is not too clear. So we can hear a few things.
I don't. It's coming and going. I don't know what. Okay.
Maybe it's your location, the network there. Or...
Okay. I was the first to be. I was logged out again, but it keep on logging in now. But it's my location. I think it's the same problem over there. Wow.
Okay, so I think we can hear a bit better now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. We need to define what in a public sector industry. That is the most important. Most of the time we talk about capitalism, but we forget to do what is it that can sustain the sector. Whether capitalism, what those statistics makes one generation in legacy that the things I want to bring on board, not question is policy level. At policy level, what is our policy level? What is our policy on oil and energy? At policy level, it will be very difficult both for the people and those are the emphases that I believe we should emphasize. Level, the bureaucrats, they will draw policies. And one line is the law with the relation with it, the operation with it. This is just stay the public sector.
Okay, so thank you very much, Mr. Abdulmalik, for that. I have a question because there's no question from our viewers, but I have a question and I want to direct it to Mr. Sebastian. So with your experience in the public sector, you said you worked under advisory roles for the previous German Chancellor's government, Angela Merkel. So I would like you to maybe give an advice because the public sector in Nigeria, yes, is still growing, and compared to the Western world. So what advice do you have for public service individuals in terms of public service structure and function? What advice do you have as to what or one thing we can implement to improve the public sector performance and the system itself in the country? So with your experience or with what you've seen or what you know. So if you have one thing that you can one advice.
Happy to, but I want to be clear that A, I don't know the Nigerian system well, and B, even the German system is pretty fraud and has a lot of problems. So by no means I would assume that kind of the German civil sector system is working better than the Nigerian. But things that I've seen that probably can be implemented in any system is attracting talent. It's probably the single biggest challenge I've seen across governments. And there are a lot of systemic reasons why that is difficult. I mentioned in Germany, for example, which is just awful. If you want to join the civil sector, you always start at the bottom. If somebody with 25 years of private sector experience joins the civil sector, unless they're Secretary of State and they're politically appointed, they always start at the bottom. And that just means that, and also if you want to leave the civil sector and come back, like leave for the private sector, spend a couple of years, gather experiences and come back, that should be encouraged, right? Because that is a huge plus. But at least in Germany, there's systemic reasons why that is not possible. So I would say the biggest challenge I see is both attracting great talent, but also nurturing and growing that talent once they're in the civil sector by creating more connections with the private sector. And again, this is why I don't think Germany is necessarily better off than Nigeria, because in Germany it's not working. But it's something that I think should be done much, much better across all the governments I've worked with.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a question from one of our viewers, Lebechi Umesike, sorry for any mispronunciation, but she asks, well, generally to all the panelists, what ways can we implement to properly carry our colleagues along and not feel left out? So not allow them feel left out. Sorry, Miss Lebechi, can you expatiate a bit on your question? So the question is, what ways can we implement, or maybe methodologies can we implement to properly carry our colleagues along so that they don't feel left out in public service? So maybe Fatima can answer that.
I can attempt.
Okay.
So I'll attempt it. I think that would have been better for Mr. Badamasuiy. But I think for me, it's about open dialogue, regular communicating and influencing and talking, in making sure your colleagues or other members of the team are aware of what's going on. And I think by doing that, when you open up opportunities for people to discuss and understand what's happening, you're already creating interest. There will be somebody who will be interested in being taken along. And then there's just also that option of actually expanding whatever is being done to ensure that people have roles and responsibilities in delivering that particular piece of work or area or whatever it is you want to carry people along. If you're involved and you have an ownership or stake in something, you feel more. When you own something, you feel more responsible towards it, and naturally you will just go with the flow because you're working on it. Eventually, you end up delivering, and then it's everybody together. And then ultimately, it's about building those relationships at different stages in the workspace. So not just in a social situation, but I'm talking about building those co-working relationships by keeping close communications with each other at many areas. Then people are aware of what's going on, and then they're all carried along nicely. That would be kind of what I would do if I had to think through it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Abdulmalik. Thank you for rejoining us. Can you hear me? Mr. Abdulmalik, can you hear me? Okay. Okay, so we have another question. We have another question from our viewers. So, Mr. Sebastian, I'll direct that to you. From Mr. Jude Unimna. Sorry for any mispronunciation. He says, how do we make public servants innovative and creative in service delivery?
I think it's linked to what I said earlier. I think creativity and the ability to innovate requires you to have many perspectives and have a rich professional experience. So I think I would encourage closer links to the private sector. And then as well, culture can affect creativity and innovation a lot. So the culture that you find in the public sector, in my experience, varies greatly depending on which ministry, which department you end up being. But I think you need people with rich professional backgrounds embedded in what we would call a modern, dynamic working culture, which again, unfortunately, the civil sector, at least in Germany and other governments, have been lags behind the tech sector, for example, by many years often when it comes to culture. So I think we need to innovate on civil sector culture and attract people who have private sector backgrounds.
So thank you very much for that. Mr. Abdulmalik, can you hear me now? Hello? Oh, okay. So sorry about the technical issues. So Mr. Abdulmalik, are you with us now? Can you hear me now? Oh, wow. Okay. All right, then. I think those are all the questions we have for today. So I would like to thank our panelists for taking the time out to join us from their busy schedules. So thank you very much for all your answers. Thank you for taking out your time to be here. So I think we hopefully in future we can have further sessions to discuss other questions that come up and a few things that we might have missed in this session. And yeah, so for now, I would like to declare the session closed. And if there's any questions or any suggestions or recommendations, you can direct it to the T's, Tongston Entrepreneurial Media, and they would give a reply as soon as they can. But for now, thank you very much to our panelists for joining us, and it has been a very intuitive, very interactive, and interesting session. It was I learned a lot. So I would like to declare the session closed and see you in another session. And yeah, thank you very much. Have a nice day. Have a nice weekend. See you.
Thank you very much for having us.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
We did it yesterday already. No collegiality or no.